Possible storms on the way for the Eastern Pacific and Gulf of Mexico on today's Tropical Weather Bulletin. And now the latest around the wide world of tropics. Tropical Weather Bulletin for June 5th. The tropics remain relatively quiet today, with what's left of Ewiniar still being traced off the coast of Alaska, extratropical cyclone, and no other areas that we're tracking right now, at least actively, but there could be one or two on the way later on in the week and this weekend. Well, in the Atlantic, it's day 5 of Atlantic hurricane season, and there's no areas of interest right now. There's a few little frontal systems moving across the Atlantic, and a storm complex across the central United States, which seems to be a regular thing that we're saying at this time of year, isn't it? And in the Eastern Pacific, obviously you've seen that we've marked a 20% chance there on day 22 of hurricane season there, moving northwesterly. A system that could develop later on in the week or over the weekend and head towards the coast of Mexico. If it did form, it would be a very short-lived system and it will pile straight into the coast of Guerrero. In the Western Pacific, things are looking pretty quiet here as well, but there are a few areas of storminess along the western Philippines and across southern China, northern Vietnam, and also over Palau. Looks like there's a little storm over there as well. So generally quiet, but a few little storms here and there. In the Indian Ocean, there's quite a big storm over the Bay of Bengal actually, but it's not certainly not a tropical cyclone, an organised system. It's just a cluster of thunderstorms blowing up there and providing rain to part of the coastline of Myanmar once again, and for parts of India, getting some storms blowing up there too. Well, in the southwest Indian Ocean, it's gotten very quiet now. With what's left of that system that we were tracking, it's now pretty much completely gone, and that, well, it's pretty much the same for the South Indian Ocean season, which is long gone by now. Well, this really is for the sake of continuity. Ewiniar really isn't doing much anymore. It's down to about 35 mile per hour winds and a pressure of 994 millibars actually. 242 kilometers from Sitka, Alaska, 272 from Hoonah, 305 from Yakutat, 335 from Juneau, and 352 from Haines. This system moving northwestwards won't make it to Anchorage before dying off, and so it's really not got very much time at all. It's the only thing we've got active though actually on the map, so that's why we're looking at it. Well, here it is, satellite imagery. It's certainly been looking impressive in the last day or two, and here it is right now, still got a very broad circulation rotating around the coast there, and it'll be delivering some gusty winds, but certainly nothing too substantial anymore. Some persistent rainfall along the coast as well, which could total storm totals of around 2 inches or 50 millimeters. Now, looking at the Eastern Pacific, you can see one or two flare-ups there, particularly of interest off the coast of Nicaragua and El Salvador there in Guatemala. A system that's blowing up. That could be the one to watch as we go through the next few days to this potential tropical cyclone. Comparing it to that earlier chance that we had, I would say it's about the same, so no real chance that it will form. Now, here's the rapid scan of a system over the United States there, Oklahoma and Texas. Just having a little look at that there, producing lots of, I imagine, storms underneath there. Now, this is the eastern United States, and still a large extratropical cyclone blowing around there near Newfoundland and down into the Caribbean. This is what it looks like here. Actually pretty quiet at the moment, but a big front moving off the coast of the Greater Antilles there, off towards the east. This is the East Atlantic off the coast of Africa. Not too much going on here either, just a few little areas there in the intertropical convergence zone, but really very little to talk about in terms of activity, and a wide shot of the Eastern Pacific there, pretty much showing the same thing that we saw just before. You can take a look at all of these on the Force 13 website and on our automated stream, which is running right now on our YouTube channel. Now, this is the Western Pacific, a few areas there blowing up, but really nothing organized at all. And this is the Bay of Bengal animated. Now you can see that system there in the Bay of Bengal itself. Not much going on with it, but certainly a lot of convection. I imagine a lot of rainfall underneath that as well. Arabian Sea, pretty quiet now. We saw a few flare-ups in the last few days, but it is now looking very quiet. But a few storms blowing up along the western coast of India as well. Precipitation charts for the Atlantic in the last 24 hours or so, showing that front moving along eastwards quite nicely. And in the United States, 2 storms that have been blowing up along there. This is wind shear graphics, those red zones showing very high wind shear, which is obviously a detriment to tropical cyclones. You can see there's quite a lot of it right now, mainly over the Gulf of Mexico. And this is the Eastern Pacific, showing you there the routes for systems to form are going to be way out towards the east and south. The further west these systems go, the more resistance they'll be putting up with in terms of wind shear. And there's the Western Pacific as well. Storms can't go too far north before they get buffeted by the jet stream. Sea surface temperatures in the Eastern Pacific are still gradually increasing, as you would expect. Temperatures pushing 32 degrees Celsius off the coast of Guerrero in Mexico and spreading further up the Gulf of California. In the Gulf of Mexico and Caribbean Sea, temperatures really warming up there as well, especially off Cuba towards the Cayman Islands. Temperatures over 30 degrees Celsius over a large area there. The Gulf of Mexico also looking good, especially the South Gulf. And this is the Western Pacific, showing an increase in temperatures there in the Philippine Sea, extending northwards as well through the Ryukyu Islands, and the South China Sea also getting up to speed. The North Indian Ocean, still very warm waters all across the basin there, up and above 30 degrees Celsius in a few spots, but in general 29 is the minimum that you're going to see there in those tropical zones. And the Southwest Indian Ocean, for what it's worth now, those temperatures still looking okay in those lower latitudes. Further south though, temperatures are decreasing. Across Australia, really not much has changed since our last update. A few little hot spots off the northwestern part of the Northern Territory and off Western Australia. And finally in the South Pacific, really very little has changed here as well, with temperatures quite flat and gradually decreasing as is expected for the time of year. So let's take a look at the anomalies compared to normal then. We still see the La Nina signature, but there's been a few warm patches in between there, which has caused the Nino 3-4 region to go up a little bit, which is curious. The Eastern Pacific tropical zone there still looking good though. Atlantic of course is very much above normal. Still a little cool slot there to its north in the subtropics, but in general the Atlantic looking very, very menacing indeed. Western Pacific temperatures up to about 1 or 2 degrees above average, hotspot near Hainan. Oceanic heat content is still really very abundant in the Western Pacific. Certainly storms that move over those red patches will have all the time in the world to do some big rapid intensification bursts. Eastern Pacific has a few spots there as well. Compared to the time of year is pretty good. In the Western Atlantic also looking very good there as well. In the Caribbean, extending from Jamaica through Western Cuba into the Gulf of Mexico, and even further east there as well now in the Caribbean. As a whole there looking very good indeed. So the computer models, spoiler alert, we're actually only looking at the East Pac / Gulf of Mexico today, because there's nothing else going on at all. So first of all, the Eastern Pacific system that may or may not form there, you see a little signature towards the end of that 5-day period, moving up towards the coast of Mexico, and then on towards, well, moves inland eventually, and not much to say about that. A brief tropical storm, possible. Will it deliver a lot of rain? Possibly, but chances at the moment are pretty low for that system developing. Now, looking at rainfall expectations over the next 7 days then, we are expecting quite a lot over Central America. Certainly if these systems get their game in gear, but we're looking in general the biggest area of rainfall over Honduras and some other areas around there. 6 inches along near Tehuantepec, Mexico, 150 millimeters, getting up towards 250 millimeters in Honduras for some rainfall, and over central Cuba getting up towards 150 millimeters there as well. So interesting rainfall patterns there, and that will increase in the longer range if this happens. This is the Atlantic / Gulf of Mexico Mexico, where you see a big area of winds, and then eventually you start to see something come together, a little bit of rotation, and what is it? It's an enormous cyclone. Is it even tropical? That's one question that needs to be asked. We're not sure yet whether that will actually be a tropical cyclone, or whether it will be subtropical or even non-tropical, even in the Gulf of Mexico. At this early stage of the season, anything's possible, but I reckon it will have a decent chance of becoming a tropical cyclone, and a really large one at that. Reminds me of Cristobal, by the way. Scan the barcode and that will take you through to the Force 13 merch store, where you can take a look at all of our items as well as our full season and individual storm animation requests. And we're still waiting for Hone. You can get a t-shirt that says it. So in the Scilly Range, the continuation of this very mammoth system that moves on and makes landfall in Louisiana, moves inland very quickly, can still be traced a little bit further north, a state or two over, maybe into Missouri, and then off towards the northeast in the end. After that though, really nothing else on the radar there, but certainly that would be an enormous storm with storm force winds of up to 60 miles per hour or higher in some places, affecting that whole coast of the Gulf of Mexico. Fascinating. Well, on this day we had a completely different kind of storm, and a rare feature, the Western Pacific in 1999, which was one of the deadest seasons on record over there. We had Typhoon Maggie, Category 3 on this day, just off the coast of the Philippines, in an otherwise very quiet month across the globe in this particular year. Moved northwest, moved between the gap between the Philippines and Taiwan, and then made for the coast of southern China. So, a very powerful storm. Category 3 peaked around 120 mile per hour winds on this day 25 years ago. Yes, so we're still code blue for what's left of Ewiniar. Funny to believe that, isn't it? But Alberto is the first name in the Atlantic this year, Aletta in the Eastern Pacific, and Hone is next up in the Central Pacific. Has been the case for 5 years. In the Western Pacific now, the next name is Gaemi. In the North Indian Ocean, our next name now is Asna. 20 storms so far in 2024. In terms of accumulated cyclone energy, we are well behind, about 35% behind as a matter of fact. And in the Southern Hemisphere, the next name in Australia is Robin. Southwest Indian Ocean, Jeremy, if it happens before the end of the month. And in the South Pacific, the next name is Pitta. That's it from our Tropical Weather Bulletin. We'll see you again tomorrow.
Become an Ultimate Fan today.